Hey, it's Dean. Another edition of Riding Home. This time with Ted Cohn joining me. We're going to get to the reason why he's on the call in a second here, but for the time being, let's just talk about the season, Ted. And coming up, you've been following Georgia since how long? 30 years?
40. I was at
Okay.
Georgia I just missed Herschel. So I got to Athens in 1983, I guess, makes me really old. I grew up a South Carolina fan, so it was pretty odd for me to be a student at Georgia. When
How'd you
I
wind up at
was
Georgia?
still, say that again.
How did you wind up at Georgia?
We lived in Augusta at the time. My dad wasn't paid attention. It was in-state tuition, and I transferred from Augusta College. Everything transferred. My parents were moving to North Carolina. I'm like, I'm not staying at Augusta College and living in an apartment. So I left and went to Athens.
So you've been around the block for a while, and one reason, well, there's a couple of reasons we got you on today, but I wanted to talk for a second here about the history of, for lack of a better term, message boards and like the .com world, because
Yeah,
you've been goofing around in that world at least
it
since the start
it
of it.
was well. Let me back up a little bit. I was at Georgia as a journalism student, and my first inclination was to get into media, get into radio or TV. I was a DJ for a little bit. I interviewed Hugh Durham for 90.5 when I was a student. Then they told me I was going to make $13,000 a year as a sports anchor in Wilmington, North Carolina. I was like, I better change course. ESPN really wasn't
Didn't
a big
exist in
time.
this way.
They were doing Australian rules football and stuff like that. I mean, it was a different time. I mean, Chip Carey made it out of my journalism school and
Uh-huh.
made it big, but there weren't many. So I got into advertising, but yeah, that's how I got to Georgia, and the message board situation was like an outlet for me to write about Georgia, talk about Georgia, and every day, 24/7,
Yep.
every not to mention that site, but it
Um,
was all the time. So I guess back then it was something called Pluto Centurion.sys was something you could get on. It was very odd. It was just a whole new world. And of course, you were dial up then. It was no high speed internet. So it might take you 20 minutes to post a message. And
that
sometimes it
long it
didn't
took you?
work. I'm just saying the internet was 28.8, 14.4, 56K. It evolved, but it was just a different world back then. And I've been on all of them. The dog vent, dog run, and then you emerged. When did you come about?
This is a
Late
good.
90s?
Yes. So Dog Post was not the name of Dog Post forever. It was Between the Hedges, and then it became Dog Post because the university, they didn't ask us for the name. It's their name, Between the Hedges, but it's trademarked. But we just switched it to Dog Post, and when I say we, eventually the people that worked with me, they were either bought out or left, and so Dog Post really started in 2001, and eventually
Okay.
went to Scout.com. But dog, you mentioned Dog Run. Dog Run was the site that we left. We left that message board, and
Okay.
what turned into Dog Run was originally Dog Post.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because I was pretty active on that board for a little bit, and I think what caught my eye about you originally was the magazine you used to publish.
Yes.
Because at the time I was in the magazine business. I was like, I'm gonna call that guy one day and try to get him to print. Let me print his magazine for him. So I never did, obviously. But when you emerged a few years ago with your own deal, what really got me excited about Dog Post, and particularly, I guess you too, because you called me, you called
Yeah, that's right.
everybody
I did.
and was like, hey, I'm changing course, I'm going on my own. And I think you were like asking questions about what can I do better? What can I, what do you like? So, but I thought that was a very nice touch, and it put me in connection with the guy running it. And it was like, that's so obvious to me and brilliant on your part to do that. And
Brilliant? I don't know. I don't know about that
well, I
part.
think you might get too many phone calls now.
No, no. People text me. I mean, this is one thing. This is on YouTube and Facebook, but The people who are
Yeah.
subscribers to Dog Post, they can just text me. They don't even have to go through the message
Yeah.
board
Yeah.
or
Yeah. It's
Matt
just
for
really
that
cool.
matter.
Right. And then, they do stuff like
Yeah.
buy double dogs and dogstruction back here.
Dogstruction.
What's the
I just had to order another order of Dogstruction. Let me tell you why we got you on here for other reasons. If you are an annual subscriber at the site, your business helped me get these out to all those folks. Now, what exactly do you do? Because there's a lot of people that watch this. This is a 7-ounce magazine.
right? Well, I'm in the direct mail business. I worked in Athens. One of the internships I had was working for Tan Staple Coupon magazine, which was a direct mail product in the late 80s, well, mid to 80s to the late early 90s or so. It was a coupon book mailed to everybody in Clark County, and that's how I got into advertising. I was trying to get one at a TV station to sell ads, but they didn't do that. And to graduate, I had to have an internship. So that's how I got into direct mail. And I did that same thing, same kind of a product in Savannah from 1988 till 2008 until I basically just ran out of gas. There was just nothing left. The recession hit. It was a horrible time. So I moved to Charlotte in 2010. Shortly thereafter, I got a job with the Daily Paper, and they had a mail department, direct mail advertising. And I was very involved with that. I was like the lead salesperson. And I got a couple of accounts that I really enjoyed working with. And about 4 or 5 years later, they just kept declining in revenue. And it was just a tough time at the newspaper. It still is for many of them. I went off on my own in 2016, I guess.
Let me ask you this. In the 80s and 90s, direct mail, I understand that was a very valuable thing. What is the value of it today? How does it work?
Well, the value today compared to, like, let's say email marketing is there's so much of it. It's just so much of it that you don't pay attention to it anymore. And direct mail cuts through that clutter and gets into the mailbox. It's a little more exclusive. Of course, it's a lot more expensive per piece or per impression, but it works. It gets exactly where it needs to go. I'd say 98% of the time. Some of it gets lost in the mail. You hear that. In fact, we had one of yours, a buddy of mine. It's so funny. A buddy of mine who is also a subscriber to Dog Post didn't get his book, and and he was kind of harassing you about it in a jokingly way on the Dog Post. I saw it. I said, dude, stop doing that. Stop calling that out. I mailed that. I'll get you one. Don't worry about it. So, and I did. I sent him one, but he knows who he is. He's probably watching this or will be watching this. But anyway, mail is just a very effective way to get one-on-one exactly who you want to get from an age, from an income, from a credit score, any number of characteristics we can effectively reach. And right now we're mailing to about half the country from Waxhaw, Charlotte, North Carolina. And it's just a lot of fun. I'm so thankful that I can still be involved in what I know about, because I don't know that much about social media or digital marketing. There's many, many smarter people than me that know how to do that. And to compete in that space is very tough. But in this space, there aren't many that have been doing it as long as I've been doing it. And a lot of fun.
Digital marketing is this whole other beast. I do want to talk about something that you and I have talked about several times, which is the logical conclusion, or it doesn't have to be logical, the end game of college football in what I would say 12 years. So let's hold on. Let me set the stage here. So we're going to fast forward to 2036, and the college football playoff, we're just going to assume it's at 12 still. But your notion is that I think ESPN and the SEC will pick and choose who they want. And when Fox and Big Ten try to start taking people out of the ACC, or we're talking really about the splitting up of the ACC into the Big Ten and the SEC. Now, this is going to take a second or two to get through, so everybody stand by. But this is very nuanced. That's the other problem. I do think that the math has changed a little bit because of Stanford and Cal. I don't know when. I mean, this video will go out shortly, but I do.
It could be happening any moment.
I think that's going to happen. I thought it was going to happen, and then it got pulled back a little bit. But I think that will happen in not that long from now. So obviously these are recorded, so I don't know exactly when this will be, when people will be watching this. But I don't see how the grant of rights is going to get changed for the ACC at all. So let's just fast forward 12 years. Where do you think that Florida State, Carolina? Let's just stick with Florida State, Carolina, and Clemson. Where do you think that those three will wind up, in your opinion? Now, I know you're not like some sort of insider, but we've talked about this a lot.
No, it's just I think it's very nuanced, and it can be looked at in a number of ways. I was thinking all along, and I still lean to Clemson and Florida State joining the SEC, despite the fact that we don't gain any money necessarily from the SEC network. We're double dipping in South Carolina and Florida, for instance. But those two schools outside of Notre Dame are the most attractive schools that are not in the Big Ten or the SEC. They really are. I mean, they have more fan base. They draw better TV ratings. If you play any of those schools against Alabama or LSU or Penn State or Ohio State, you're going to get good ratings. So from an advertising standpoint, the more eyeballs watching, and it's about matchups. It's not necessarily about a population of Clemson University. It's about who's going to watch that. And a lot of people would watch any of the games against the big boys of both leagues against Clemson and Florida State. On the other hand, like you always point out, the SEC network is not going to gain any subscription revenue from those two schools. But on the other, but then again, is it a guarantee that in 10 years that part of the contract will be the same as it is now? I doubt it will be. We might have an NFL Sunday ticket thing going on by then, which is an even bigger story. It's not necessarily tied to a state. It's tied to $300 a year or $500. It could be $500 a year by then. And you could see that happening with those two leagues. It could be like a Saturday ticket as opposed to a Sunday ticket.
The challenge right now is that I think a lot of people are in 2023 thinking when they should be, thinking about this in 2023, Florida State and Clemson will not join the SEC. It's not going to happen.
Nope.
10 or 12 years from now, the question then becomes, it's not going to be about cable. Disney itself specifically, but everyone else too, is going to have to take what they have from cable television. Cable television at its peak, I just had this conversation earlier today with someone else. Cable television at its peak was 100 million viewers somewhere around 2011 and 12. That's when cable companies specifically were at their zenith of power. That has since shrunk because of any number of reasons, but mainly because of the cost and cable cutting. Okay, that is the number one reason. Now that we're around 70-ish million people, it is becoming much more complicated to make the argument in the future that this is only about cable subscriptions, because that's going to kind of go away.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's going to be a problem. And Greg Sankey is very smart. There's no question about that. He's at this stage, this is hard to believe. He is the longest serving commissioner. He just started in 2015 or 14. He's not even been around 10 years. So
right.
he's their symbiotic relationship with Disney means that the SEC is going to want Disney to land the plane of taking people from cable to where they're watching with their phones or their screens. Mm-hmm. And when they do that, then the question becomes, because all everybody will talk about, and you know this in Charlotte, all anybody talks about now is how powerful Carolina is. And there's no question that North Carolina is a great brand. They are. They have Michael Jordan.
They are.
They're a great brand. But they do not have, and they could in 10 years, they do not have the brand that you need, which is football, for our current discussion. Now, the other thing, and I'll throw it back to you, is, I mean, I know Clemson wants to be in the SEC. They have interest in being in the SEC. That is where they would prefer to be. North Carolina, I think they would prefer to be in the Big Ten. And Florida State, I think, would rather be in the SEC, but I'm not as certain. Clemson is the one that I'm almost sure would rather be in the SEC. And the SEC also has to make, let me just say this one last thing here too. The SEC has to look to its West as well. Does it make sense to add, you know, I don't think it does, but Baylor or teams like that? You know, I don't know.
Baylor and Oklahoma State. Actually, I'm a geek about this sort of thing, and I looked up Baylor and Oklahoma State's TV ratings, and they're up there with anybody in the ACC outside of Clemson and Florida State.
Yes,
Might have a lot to do with them playing Texas and Oklahoma, but at the same time, they're into football.
But
they really are.
Auburn. Let me just say this: Auburn is a top 7 or 8 football product on television. They can't. I mean, why? Why are they that? Well, their two biggest rivals are two of the biggest brands in college football. And do you get is Alabama without Auburn? So there's that question. And then so that there's certain things that will always be, I think. Right. You know, for Georgia's always going to play the Gators. They're always going to play Auburn, and I would say they're almost always for sure going to play Georgia Tech. We've already seen they cut Carolina, Georgia, okay? Tennessee, Georgia is not going to be every single year. There's going to be certain games that they don't play. But
that's now with 8 games. You know, the 9-game situation could change that for South Carolina and Georgia, for instance.
They're going to have to pay the money for that, though. And in order for
they do.
And in order for them to pay the money, they got to land the plane. And we're 2 or 3 years from that. See, that's the problem is Disney's trying to – it's not just Disney. I should stop just saying Disney. Everybody's trying to take people from a particular platform and put them on another platform. I just had a conversation 2 weekends ago with a person at a very large company. I'm not even going to say who they are. And they basically said, yeah, man, we're trying to figure out how to take everybody from Twitter while they're watching games. And I'm like, well, good luck. You know, that's a multi-year process. Disney, News Corp, Universal. I mean, the Big Ten is going to be playing games on Peacock this week in the 2 days or whatever it is. That's going to be challenging.
I really do think that the Big Ten did a better job with their TV than.
So I don't know if go ahead. I don't know if I agree with you, but go ahead.
Well, the only reason I say that, they can grow more easily with all of the platforms that they're on. If they're on NBC, CBS, Fox, they've got 3 places to put games. Right. The SEC has ESPN, ABC, ESPN2, the SEC Network, but they're not ubiquitous places necessarily. But NBC, ABC, ABC, Fox, CBS.
We are going to see, and I don't know the answer. I think the Big Ten is too spread out, but I will sit here and say I don't know the answer. Does it make more sense to have a rifle approach or a shotgun approach to this thing? And I think it's, you know, the other aspect of this too is that the Big Ten is going to go into contract negotiations in 2029, 2030 for a new contract. Disney and the SEC and the ACC, for that matter, are tied together until 2034 and 2036. They're in bed together for some time.
Yeah, they are. And but what you just said will ring a bell if you think about it. If Fox is negotiating in 2030, that's probably when they're going to get most aggressive about trying to get somebody else in their league.
That is the moment to watch. But and here's more nuance. Okay, obviously, I think you're well aware of this. But unless the grant of rights changes in a very specific way, the ACC schools are not leaving. They're going to have to blow this up some way. North Carolina
have to blow it up.
North Carolina is not happy. North Carolina is not happy with the current situation.
Yeah, it's not a good idea. It'll be if they try to do it, like Florida State thinks they're trying to do it. They're not going to do it anytime soon. But when and if, and it will happen at some point. It'll happen before 2035, I predict. Not anytime soon, but probably when Fox calls Florida State and Clemson and says, "We want you in now. We're going to cover your ass."
That would be for Fox. Now think about it this way: Fox's NFL contract is about $1 billion a year, or something like that. All of the contracts for the NFL's something in that universe. They would be saying to uh, the the ACC situation is not only does the ACC itself own Florida State, Clemson, Wake Forest, Boston College, not only do they own their rights, but there's the penalty to leave, which is like roughly $130 million, and then there's which is not nothing, by the way. But the real problem is that the ACC would still own their rights until 36. So you would have to get some attorney to figure out what is the value of purchasing back your home games. So we know in that scenario that the 130, let's just call it 125, it's going to be $250 million just to get them away from the ACC, Florida State and Clemson. A,
Right.
and then B, you got to get the broadcasting rights, which may or may not, which are, I don't know if they're worth more than that or not, and how many years. So is News Corporation going to really say this is worth this is worth $500 million? I don't know that they'll say that it is. And that's Disney too, by the way. It doesn't. Well, Disney in this case would not be a suitor, but Universal, News Corporation, CBS. Is it worth that kind of money?
What if Disney really is in more trouble than we even imagine, and they say, "Well, look, you can have it, Fox, take it." I mean, that could happen.
That could happen, but they haven't done that before.
No, they haven't. But this is I've never seen them. I've never seen them this is unaggressive a word. They've never been like this. They're firing people.
They don't want ABC.
They've been growing forever, and now they're not. They're withering.
They don't want ABC. It's not. It does. Broadcast television is not the future.
Yep.
Screaming headline, as everyone already knew. But I think for Disney itself, in terms of sports only, it goes NFL, NBA, SEC. Like, they're not interested in baseball, really. They don't care about NASCAR. They kind of are throwing some money at hockey so they can have it at times. But, Fox is so in bed with the Big Ten. Like, what other people don't understand is that Fox, which parent company is News Corporation, but they keep changing the name. That's confusing for me.
Right.
They own the Big Ten network. They own like 69% of the Big Ten network. So they keep that revenue. They keep that revenue. So that's why for the SEC currently, that channel is such a big deal. Now, I was talking about landing the plane earlier. When inevitably ESPN in the next 2 years, probably maybe a little before that, goes straight to the consumer. It says, here's our ESPN app. You can watch everything on your phone. I mean, dude, they are promoting Georgia, Tennessee Martin on television consistently right now. And that game's on ESPN Plus.
Right.
They're starting the process. I actually was shocked when I saw this. Is that a Georgia commercial? And it wasn't just once. It's not just on SEC Network. It's on Big ESPN. So let me just say this. Is what Disney going to do? Are they going to say, oh, well, when you buy the bundle, the SEC Network is included in that bundle, and the SEC Network is $2 a month for every, well, if they get from my understanding is once things get to about 50 million or 60 million cable subscribers, Disney's flipping the switch. They're going straight to the consumer, and that's what it's going to be. And the question is, can they? This is all about money, no question, but it's so complicated for the ACC. And Florida State is so eager. Florida State and Clemson both. North Carolina is not happy, but they're not happy with Florida State right now either. That needs to be pointed out as well. But, my thought when I was talking to somebody at Disney the other day was, if you already know you're going to get Clemson and Florida State in 2030, whatever, why don't you just go lock it down in 2034 and just be done with it?
Right.
But I don't,
Or go ahead and say this is what we're doing. We're doing this. We're joining the SEC in 2034.
That's what Florida State is going to say. We are leaving the ACC, and they're going to do that sooner than later. I don't know when soon is, but sooner than later.
No, I definitely agree with that.
Right now, they don't have a landing spot. See, that's the problem. And the Big Ten
They could
just
always say that. They could always say with the SEC, we're joining. SEC could say, please come in 2035. We'd love
right,
to have you.
yeah. But
Yeah.
the thing about it is too, are UW and the University of Oregon worth $70 million a year? And I'm just not sure that they are. That
No, they're not. They're not worth it. But they had to have made some sort of a promise to USC and UCLA when they got them. Hey, we're going to get 2 more at least, because they can't. I mean, 2 teams on the West Coast playing minor sports in Illinois.
But you don't think that's going to happen in the ACC? I mean, so we're talking about Stanford playing a Thursday night basketball game in Boston College.
I think it's really weird that that's happening.
Worse would be in Miami. I mean, that's a 5-hour flight.
I'm really surprised that ACC is interested in those tools. I guess because of defense, they think somebody's leaving, maybe,
Yes.
which is not going to happen. But they have to replace those numbers to keep their money.
They're doing it out of fear. See,
yes,
and they don't have the ACC is really not in that bad a position, in my opinion.
I don't think so either.
Of the money, I mean, the money is the problem, and
it's only a problem in a couple of places though, Florida State and at Clemson and Miami, because all the other schools, they don't really care on an SEC type level.
But listen,
they really don't.
You and I both have very long, ties to the state of South Carolina, and understand. I went to college there, my wife and the family and all that. Florida State, to some degree, and Clemson and Florida State are not dissimilar. They have both had really good runs in the last 30 years, and they both had really rough times too. Now, Florida State's probably had a better 30 years. Is that right? If you include
Clemson's had elite level. I mean, how many championships have they won in the past? They won at least 2.
They've won 2 national championships in the last 30 years. Clemson.
And they won the last 10.
Right? Yes, but I'm talking about a 30-year period here.
Okay.
So Florida State's won, what is 30? So probably they've only won 2 in a 30-year period, 93, and then, no, they've won 3. So 93, 99, and 13. But they've both been not great. And Clemson's not great was rough. So from 93, for sure, if not before that a little bit, till, 2011, actually, to some degree 2012 was rough / bad. So if you are if you are a network television company, those 2 schools are not Texas or SC. They are smaller audiences than that. So is it worth the money? This is what it's going to come down to. And I think people like State, Vanderbilt, they there's going to be some, even South Carolina, there's going to be some sensitivities there that if you're not pulling your weight in terms of viewership in the future, are you worth the money?
And what's going to happen? I mean, I think the next evolution is going to be a giant Big Ten in 2035, a giant Big Ten and a giant SEC. Maybe the Big 12 has 12 teams or 16 teams left. That's going to be it. Nobody else is getting paid.
That's what everybody thinks.
But beyond that, it might be 20 schools, 30 schools, 40 schools. People are going to get cut.
But Vanderbilt, I was just going to say, that means people are getting cut.
Right. So,
but you don't care. So one last thing here before we go. We've gone on for a while here because I never stop talking. Does it hurt your feelings where college football is today versus where it was in the 80s and 90s?
Listen, I'm a national champion now. So my feelings are not hurt anymore. I've done it all now twice.
Oh.
So my feelings will not be hurt. I'm okay with anything that happens. Georgia's going to be involved with it. We're still going to be elite, and that's what's important to me. But yeah, it's not as cool of a place as it was in terms of the whole aggregate college football. It's kind of sad, really.
Why?
For a lot of reasons.
Why is it sad?
Well, because a team like, for instance, South Carolina, my dad went there, my grandfather and my great-grandfather, they were excited about going 7-4 and going to the Tangerine Bowl and losing to Miami of Ohio. I mean, that's South Carolina. They've had, of course, better success than that since then. But that was the first bowl they went to outside of the Peach Bowl in 1969 and 1946. They played Wake Forest in the Gator Bowl. But when I was a kid, they went to the Tangerine Bowl, and they were excited, and they lost to Miami of Ohio.
They had not won a bowl game until the '93 Quest Bowl. So
correct.
They have had a rough run. But why? I guess to me, if you like to digest sports, there's never been a better time because you can always get it. The rough part of that is, there's a lot of money involved in sports, but all money is not evil. Some is, I guess, and it all depends on your perspective too. I am old enough to remember. Do you know the last Georgia game that was not televised in some way, pay-per-view, whatever? Do you have any idea what it is? 1999 Vanderbilt. Georgia was losing into the fourth quarter. That's the last time a Georgia game's not been on television, pay-per-view or some other form. So this is.
We had Larry Munson then, though, which made it probably okay.
Radio has come and gone as just a medium, generally speaking, but which is not always good, I don't think. But what made Larry so special was that you didn't have television, and you could.
Right.
And he was so good. It wasn't just him. I mean, you got the guy at Tennessee, the guy at Mississippi State. John Ward at Tennessee. There were no shortage of really good radio folks, but we don't. You couldn't watch Georgia Ole Miss. You had to be at the game, and Georgia itself and every other SEC school, but certainly Georgia has benefited from the growth of college football through television, and losing CBS. That hurts the SEC a little bit, but they will have a broadcast partner in ABC that will matter. I mean, the question is, why was the SEC on CBS so big? Was it big because of CBS, or was it big because of the SEC? And CBS, when the SEC got there, was about the time. This predates this a little bit, but CBS was in the dumps, and then soon thereafter they had. Raymond, what was the name of that show? Raymond Mono's show.
Everybody loves
Raymond, and then here comes Survivor, and then Big Brother comes along. Then they get the NFL back. They have CBS, and then boom, CBS becomes the largest network of the four broadcasts. And the SEC rode that way, but were people watching the SEC on CBS because of CBS or because of the league? I think it's because of the league. Period.
Yeah, I think it was both, really. And I think Vern, the broadcaster, what's his last name? I can't remember, but he was perfect for that time. Perfect.
And we're gonna. I mean, it's so strange. I watched of course, I watched too much. I will admit, but I watched NBC last week with their coverage, and it was just like, well, I've got to get used to this. I'm not used to this at all. The SEC will have an easier transition to ABC because they're already on ESPN anyway. The Big Ten being on CBS this week is going to be strange, but
really weird.
But to be honest with you, good for CBS. They made a huge mistake not making a legitimate offer to keep the SEC. That was a huge mistake. But to their credit, they picked up the pieces. They got the Big Ten's essentially number 2 game or number 3, whatever you want to call it. And now you have, people are going to watch Ohio State. People are going to watch Michigan. They just are. So I'll be watching it for a little bit before the Georgia game, and we'll just see what happens. But it is going to be an odd last year where you have, CBS promoting Big Ten games and saying farewell to the SEC.
I think you're right.
Very odd time. All right. Any other last thought? What do you want to see from Carson Beck this weekend?
I want to see, 14 of 19, 275 yards in a quarter and a half. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions.
Everybody, how can they get in touch with you if they have needs as it relates to direct marketing and mailings?
Just go to gbaileydirect.com. Everything is there. And You can call me from there. You can email me from there.
I'm gonna put a link to that website right down below. I know we're way into the video, but if you've stuck this long, let me tell you, he helped me out a tremendous amount getting these. It was not a small amount of magazines to get out, and it was very precise, and we had very few mess ups. Just the one person, so far as I can
Yeah.
tell, out of
Judge Larry is his name.
there you go. But he got his eventually, so
He got it.
it's all good. All right, well, thanks for joining me, and we're gonna see what happens with Carson Beck this weekend. Thanks for watching, y'all.
All right. Thanks, Dean.
All right, bye bye.